Right, thanks very much indeed. Can some of you on the edges, just for a moment, move here? Because I want to take a picture and tweet it, and I want to make it look as though it's really crowded, a big attraction and everything. So if some people from the edges, then you can go back to where you were, but just fill those seats. So look, so they do the same at the Oscars. They have actual seat fillers at the Oscars. Sorry? And then you can all go back if you want, or you can stay there. Right. Oh yeah, that's going to look great. Right. Okay, if you could all, hang on a sec, if you could all now sort of smile as if I said something dead funny. I mean, I won't be saying anything very funny, but just pretend I have. So look as though you're really enjoying this lecture. Here we go. Brilliant. And I'll tweet that now, you see. You can go back and you can carry on looking bored and looking like students and looking like it's early on a Tuesday morning. Just wait for you to get back to your seats. Right, I'll tell you, to start with, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. None of you in this room, apart from the lecturers and the tutors, will remember the 1970s. That's when I started in the 1970s, T-Rex, sexual harassment, Jimmy Savile. It was a marvellous era. And I started in journalism in the 1970s in a route that I think will probably not be open to a lot of you people. Basically, I dropped out of university because I wanted to go into journalism. I'd written reviews for the university paper, and I thought I was a shit-hot writer at that point. I was probably wrong, but I thought it was really, really good. And to give you an idea of the reviews that I did and how long ago in history this was, two of the reviews I did, one was the Beach Boys and one was the Who, doing their sort of early gigs. But yeah, so I'd written these reviews. And then I dropped out of university because I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do writing. And it was writing more than journalism, more than story finding or anything like that I wanted to do. And I wrote to virtually every regional and weekly newspaper group in the country. And at that time, I must have sent about a couple of hundred letters. Now you're looking at about 4 newspaper groups owning the lot. So it's a lot more difficult to get into than it was when I did. And I just happened to... I worked for the Western Daily Press in Bristol, and I just happened to get in there because there was a mad editor, and he used to throw typewriters at people. Now, let me explain what a typewriter is. You've seen him in old movies, but basically this editor was a nutter, and he was always firing people. And I went, and he said, and the interview didn't go particularly well, but then somebody left, and he just sent me a telegram, actually. He sent me a telegram, can you start on Monday? Do I need to explain what a telegram is?
Somebody yesterday mentioned a telegram.
Did they? Yeah, you know what telegrams are. And then started on a weekly newspaper, which was a traditional route in those days. I was on a weekly newspaper, then on a daily regional paper, the Western Daily Press. They ran a group of weeklies. And from there, I went freelance in about I worked for the Oxford Mail for a bit. I worked for the Central Office of Information, which was a government publicity department where they put out propaganda basically about how great Britain was. And then from there, I became freelance years and years ago and started doing my legendary column for The Guardian, which is interesting because I can see you all looking sort of fresh-faced. You all want to get into journalism. And, has anybody suggested dentistry or plumbing, or one of those things where there's actually jobs? Because The Guardian has just made a whole load of redundancies. And basically, a couple of people who worked in the north of England, myself and Harry Pearson, our columns just dropped off the edge because they're getting rid of freelancers, and they're actually making compulsory redundancies and all that at The Guardian. Now, I don't want to bring you down too much. Have any of the speakers sort of brought you down and said there's not a lot of jobs about? Yeah, I mean, basically, there aren't a lot of what traditionally we would call jobs, but I don't think that's particularly a cause to be downhearted, because I can see you all, with your iPads and computers and things, and as I say, I'll be tweeting the picture of you all a little bit later on out to the world, or the 16,500 followers or whatever. But the point is, there are all these new technologies you get into, but you've got to sort of do it yourself and decide, really. I mean, years ago you had the luxury of being able to go into it and then sort of, while you were in it, decide what area you want to, what area of expertise was good for you. Now I think what you have to do is basically work out where you're going to go. And I'm just trying to think of a good example for you. Do you all like Charlie Brooker in The Guardian? Charlie Brooker is like your sort of archetypal modern columnist. Started writing about games because he was interested in games and did his own blog. And then he did, I think it was called TV Go Home. I think it was a sort of, it was a blog about television. And from there, he got into it, and now he's got a TV show and all that. And I know it's not a career route as such, but that, to me, is how it's going to work these days, rather than... there are a few training schemes, and I can tell you about this because my daughter got on one and she did very well, and she's now working in sport for the Mail on Sunday. So associated newspapers, and I know not everybody loves the Daily Mail, but they do invest in journalism, and they're one of the few groups that still do invest. That really, it's between the Daily Mail and the BBC. They're two organisations where there are still training schemes and there are still jobs that I know about. There are others. I know I think Thompson Regional Newspapers run a training scheme as well, but they're nowhere near as many. I just went into a newspaper straight off, off the street. The first job I ever did was the obituaries. Actually, I used to have to go to the undertaker on a... Do you do obituaries as well? Yeah. I was working for a paper called the Kingswood Observer in Bristol, and my first job on a Monday morning was going around to the undertakers, and he would give me a list of names which are basically just people who were dead people. I would get a list of names in my notebook, dead people. He'd give me the address of the widow or the nearest and dearest, and I used to have to spend Monday and Tuesday walking round, because I couldn't drive in those days, walking round housing estates and the houses in this area, just speaking, oh, sorry to hear your husband's died. What were his interests? What did he do? You used to just get, it was great training because you just get the history of the people and you'd realise then that there might be something you might have missed. And one thing I would always say to you is ask one extra question. When you think an interview's finished, every time, ask one extra question, whatever it is, because there will always be something that you've missed. And I learnt that when I was 19, doing obituaries. There was always, I'd ask, because a lot of the people had been in the war in those, anybody remember the Second World War? It's just me. But a lot of these people who were dying in 1974 or whatever had fought in the war, and some of them even in the First World War. And sometimes there was a little detail that they just forgot to give you. And you saw, oh yeah, he stormed Normandy. Oh yeah, he did, he liberated a concentration camp. Or, they tell you all sorts of things like that, which you never knew. I did a piece, this was for The Independent in about 1980s, about the mid-1980s, where I was asking about Rochdale had got into some cup match. They got to the fourth round of the cup. So I just wanted to do a colour piece about Rochdale. And I phoned loads of people. I phoned the council, and just to kind of, they said Cyril Smith, who was the MP for Rochdale, always likes to go to the market and buy his cheese. And there was just a line about Cyril Smith, who was the MP. He's now discredited and all that, but in those days it was all okay. But anyway, he was the MP for the town. They gave me a line about him buying his cheese, which gave me an intro. I'd done the whole interview and got all the details, but just this line, and you will always get one line, and it might give you an intro. I don't know how many of you want to go into print journalism. Do most of you want to go into print, or do you see? Yeah, if you want to go into print journalism, what you're looking for, obviously, is, I'm just teaching grammar to suck eggs that I've told you all this, but you're looking for an intro. But if you can bring it back to the intro at the end, that's particularly good. If you look on my website, and I don't want to plug my website, but I tweet, because I get lots of tweets and things about, well, where's your Guardian column, where's your Guardian column? Some of the old ones that I've done, I've put up there. If I see one that's still on my computer, I put it up there. And there's one that I've put up last night, actually, about Jim Rosenthal, the presenter, TV presenter on ITV. And it was the World Cup 2006, and he, they threw to him because he was presenting the thing, and he had a fold in the middle of his shirt, as if it had just come out. He'd put on a new shirt. He'd just come out of the box, and nobody had ironed it for him. So I did a piece about how I did a short-lived series at YTV, which thank God is not on YouTube. But I did this short-lived series at YTV where we used to have, in those days, in the golden days of plenty at YTV, I used to have an actual dresser. Like in the theatre, you'd have a dresser who would look after all your clothes and make sure you were okay and there was no fluff on your jacket and that. And this dresser ironed my shirt for me. So I did a thing about ironing a shirt. Then I did a thing about how difficult it is to present live TV, because Jim Rosenthal is very good at doing that, and you might think he's a bit sort of Alan Partridge-ish, but, presenting live TV is very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's not as difficult as brain surgery, but you have to. It's one of those things like you're listening in your earpiece, and you've got to keep it all going, and it's live, and you're under that pressure. So I ended the piece by saying, and I don't like to quote from my own pieces, but I was rather pleased with this. I ended the piece by saying it is very difficult to TV presenting is a difficult skill, but a nicely ironed shirt is a good start. So I went from the shirt at the top, didn't mention it through the piece, and then came back to the shirt at the end. Which, if you are thinking of column writing, if you can do it rounded like that, it's good. In between times, about 1979, is this boring the arse off you, by the way? Anybody? Yeah, anybody. 1979, which again, we were still in the golden era of square. It was before round tea bags were invented, so a long time ago. So we were still in that golden era, and I went into radio because what I'd always wanted to do, to be honest, was get into radio. I mean, I like the journalism, I like the columns and things, but get into radio was what I really wanted to do. Having grown up with sort of pirate radio and all the, the Beatles and the Who and the Stones and the Kinks and the swinging blue jeans and the big three. Anyway, having grown up with all that, I did want to get into radio. So I took a news job at Radio Hallam in Sheffield about 1979. And from news, I crossed into, about 78 actually, and crossed into presenting about 79. So I was doing the dual things, the radio presenting and the journalism. But I've always sort of enjoyed radio more because you don't have to think about it as much. Radio, you're there, and once it's gone, and however crap it was, it doesn't matter because you can't go back and do it again, so I like having a bit. See, people are walking out already. Can I get a picture of you walking out? So I'll tweet. Later on I shall be tweeting pictures of you all walking out. Actually, I haven't tweeted this yet, but I'll tweet it in a sec. So basically I went to radio, in commercial radio. I worked for LBC, that's the London sort of news station. I worked for Hallam because I started off on news. I worked for Piccadilly in Manchester, started off on news. I've worked for a disturbingly high number of radio stations, which occasionally, when I do Fighting Talk on 5 Live, they do refer to all the radio stations I've worked for and question why I got the sack from all those stations. But fortunately, Colin Murray's got the sack from Match of the Day too, so he's not raising it anymore. So yes, I worked for a number of radio stations, but carried on for about the last 14, maybe 16 years, doing the Guardian column, Screen Break, which just finished at the start of this year, owing to the Guardian having a strategy. I mean, for all I know, their strategy might be right, but nobody I speak to in in newspapers, appears to think Alan Rusbridge of The Guardian's got an idea what he's doing, but maybe he has. I don't know. But basically his strategy is he set up a Guardian in America. He wants to be the world's leading liberal newspaper on the net, but he's not found out a way to make money from it, which is a mystery to everybody, how that's going to work. And certainly, if he's making journalists redundant, as he is, lots of them, to finance people going to Australia, because he wants to set up, he has set up in Australia and in America, you wonder, well, what's going to be if you get rid of writers, what's the point, really? Live blog on the X Factor, that's sort of almost like ditching Guardian values. But, as I say, he might turn out to be right. And that's the point about it all. It's a point that's relevant to all you. Nobody knows. Nobody has, you can listen to as many experts as you want, nobody has the slightest idea what is the right way to go with the internet. All I can say to you in your personal terms is that Charlie Brooker sort of found a right way to go, but maybe that's just because he's very, very talented. Well, I'm sure you're all very, very talented as well, obviously. But, you know, because he had this extraordinary, what I'm saying is he had this interest in computer games and TV, and from that he sort of parlayed a career for himself, which I think is what some of you will have to do, rather than, like I did, just go, oh, journalism, I'd like to do that, and going into it quite easily, and then deciding while in it what I wanted to do. Having said that, as I say, my daughter, she went to Sheffield University, did journalism there, got a degree about 2 years ago. She's 22 now, or 3 years ago, and working for the Mail on Sunday on the sports desk, but went through the Mail training scheme, which is very, very difficult to get onto. But, you know, I'm sure with a sort of talent and perseverance, some of you could do that. And similar to the BBC, which I think is even harder to get on. But well, I suppose what I'm trying to say is the traditional training routes have sort of shifted a bit, and therefore you have to be self-starters, but, you know, don't be downhearted if you have a passion. And I think you really, more than I did, you know, you really do have to have a passion. What I'll do is, because I've got, you know, I could bore on for years about my so-called career, which has like been all over the place. There was somebody, I used to do a bit of sport for TVAM, and there was, when the Australian guy, Bruce Gingell, was in charge there. Mike will know Bruce Gingell very well. His expression was, it's all over the place like a mad woman's shit. And my career has been a little bit like that. It's a lovely, it's a charming Australian expression. But rather than bore on for hours about what I did, if you want to ask me some questions, and if I can relate it to any of my experience, I will do. So if anybody's got any burning questions they'd like to ask about anything.
Have you got any tips for the racing today?
No, I mean, the irony is I'm doing a column for the Racing Post, because the Guardian ditched my column, and of course I was overwhelmed with offers to take the column elsewhere. There was the Racing Post, they offered the Racing Post. Yeah, so I'm doing the column for the Racing Post, even though it's of absolutely no interest. And you wouldn't want my bloody tips anyway, to be honest. I had West Ham to win 2-1 last night against Spurs, and that gives you an example of where they were 2-1, but it's after 67 minutes, so yeah, no good. So no racing tips. But I may be able to, if you see, I don't really know what you want to know. And what stage you're at in your journalism studies and what will help you. But I'd love to, if you want to ask me a question, and I'll relate it back to what you're interested in. Otherwise, what I will do is pick on one or other of you and ask you, and then you can tell me and I can try it. So if anybody's got anything they want to, yes?
A bit general, but so far we've learned quite a lot about hard news journalism, like I'm definitely more magazines,
Right.
columns and stuff. You could just sort of give me a bit of...
Yeah, well, I've written for a lot of magazines. I used to write for GQ quite a bit, and a magazine called Later, which then closed. And I used to write actually for Public Servant, which was the magazine for high-ranked public servants, you know, council leaders and things. The way I used to do it was, if I had an idea which I thought was a real brilliant idea, was pitch it to be, and again, you I suppose in a way you need to know people. I pitched it to people who had worked in newspapers that I'd worked on, do you know what I mean? And then I thought, but I think one of the keys to magazine journalism is knowing your market, you know, read find the magazine that you think you could write for, so it's one that has stuff that interests you. And again, one of the ways to do this, I suppose, these days is via a blog. I mean, that will give you, if there's something that really interests you, and you can't think of anywhere to sell it. I mean, at your stage, it'd be difficult to go direct to a magazine until maybe, you know, you were in the business in some other way. But if there's something particular, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was in Pré-à-Manger, and I noticed I got a role. I got First of all, it's on the till. They say, if you're eating in, we have to pay VAT. It's a bummer, but the government make us do it. And then I got this bag, and it was this, if your person behind the counter gets all serviette-ish like, man, and gives you loads of serviettes, we're trying to preserve the environment, man, and all that sort of stuff. And I thought that's really interesting, these firms that pretend to be hippies, what they call the ice cream people, Ben & Jerry's, and Pré à Manger, and these people who say, oh yeah, we're really sustainable, man, and all that sort of stuff, and all these bags can be recycled, and all that. And I thought, they're just, I would rather they put fat capitalist bastards on the thing, fat capitalist tax-dodging bastards, and then they're not trying to fool you. You know what they are. It's like £4.50 for a sandwich. They're not, they're not trying to sustain the planet. They're trying to sell you a very expensive sandwich. So that was an idea that I thought, well, that'll be useful somewhere. It'll probably end up as an AOB on Fighting Talk. But you know what I mean? If you think of an idea, write it down. Even keep a notebook by your bed, quite seriously, because I think of some great stuff at night, especially if I've been drinking. And then in the morning, forget the whole thing. So that's one piece of advice that you can do right now, is keep a notebook by your bed. Go to Wilkinson's, buy 4 cheap spiral-bound, reporters' notebooks. So they probably give them for free here, but get your notebooks, put one in the kitchen table, one by, and you will think of stuff. And then if you read magazines, and read the sort of magazines that might interest you, and because it loads of features. I mean, the problem with it is it's such a bloody closed shop in a way. I mean, even for me, I've been in it for years and years and years, but, Mark Bradley, who I think, was he here yesterday? Was he? He's on later today. Well, I had a chat with him, and he's got no money to pay column. He actually tweeted me first, said, because I tweeted something about the Wakefield Express, which is in the group of newspapers that he runs. And I liked the redesign, so I tweeted that I liked the redesign. And he said, oh, do you want to get involved in any way? Well, I know they've got no money to pay anybody, but I thought, well, at least they'll go on the net if I write a piece for him, and I will get round to it. Actually, if he comes and wants to tell him, I'll get round to it. But because I had a meeting with him about 3 weeks ago, whatever. But it's a sort of way to get your stuff out there and get you thinking of ideas. Even though I'd be writing a column for nothing, it'd go on the web, and it'd increase your profile in a way, and you can use Twitter and all that. So at your stage, it's just ideas, and it's getting them out there, really. And then, maybe trying to flog something further down the line. But yeah, pursue the interesting, because I think magazines is probably, so the thing about magazine editors is they will get it, even if they've not got the money or they've not got the budget, they'll get excited about ideas, and then they'll go that step, go the extra mile over the budget and actually pay for them if it's something that excites them. So yeah, keep thinking of ideas and keep that notebook handy.
Yesterday, Jeff Stelling was saying to us some advice that you should maybe pick a niche. Do you think that's the best way to go?
Probably you're a little bit, I mean, what does Jeff Stelling know? What does he know? I mean, you'll have all sorts of idiots this week who'll tell you all sorts of stuff, but I know what I'm talking about. No, I think probably I know what he means. It's rather like what I was saying about Charlie Brooker, that he had his passion and he got it out there and everything, and from that he got a job. Having said that, nowadays Charlie Brooker would not be picked up by The Guardian, because they've completely changed tack. They've suddenly got no money, and that's the trouble with, that's what worries me about The Guardian, which is still my favourite newspaper. Still the newspaper. I still get The Guardian every day, even though my mate says it's an act of self-loathing to go out and buy The Guardian, but I still do buy it. But I can remember as recently as a year and a half ago, 2 years ago maybe, I was writing the sport column on the back, and I would get calls from the Media Guardian on a regular basis. Oh, can you write us something about radio? Because you're in radio. And they'd pay like sort of 400 quid for a piece about radio, which, which is quite good, on top of my column. And that would regularly come. They were awash with money. And then all of a sudden, that's what worries me. It's the suddenness of it. All of a sudden, whoop, no money left. It's all gone. It's all gone. Adam Rusbridge is learning to play the piano. They're opening up in Australia and America. We've got no money left, which is, to me, that if I was working in any business, and I'm sure people at Jessop's and HMV and all those businesses have the same thing, They're awash with money. It's the when I worked for Real Radio for a little while as well here, and one year it's the Real Radio Christmas party, and they had some popular group to play. I can't remember. They had two. They had something like Take That. It was like sort of which they paid thousands for, and Aha were on there as well for the old people. So anybody here heard of? I know you have. Yeah. Anyway, but they had, like one band for the young people, one band for the old people, booze, free booze all over the place. Then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks later, they've run out of money. They've got no money, which is it's madness. You'd think there was, Leeds United is a prime example. You'd think there was some, you're brought up to think, are these people in business? Because I've never been a manager of anything and never been in any business. But over the years, your respect for these people, you think, they're business people, they must know what they're doing. How bloody idea? None of them, really. I mean, there are probably one or two people do, but probably Pré à Manger do. let's charge £4.50 for sandwiches and pretend we're hippies. So yeah, I think at this stage, I would say you don't want to be too niched, but if you do have a passion for something, blog. You're teaching all blogging and things here. I'm sure they are. And blog it and then tweet it and Facebook it. Send it to me, I'll retweet it. I've got like a lot of followers, or quite a lot of followers. At the back there, are you just scratching your face? I thought you wanted to. Sorry? Just doing your hair, okay. Anybody else got a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what kind of advice would you have for someone who's maybe interested in kind of starting off freelancing?
Starting off right from scratch, freelancing. So it depends on your area. What area would you be freelancing? What are you good at? What do you know?
What am I good at?
Yeah, what do you know?
Arts, culture, music.
Well, now the music, there's a sort of, it's arts, culture and music's not bad actually. What I would try and do is get yourself known to the arts editors of the broadsheets who do a lot of arts coverage. The Telegraph, The Guardian, The Independent, Sunday Times. Because there'd still be, even though they're paying less than they used to, there'd still be opportunities. Certainly, the thing with arts is, if there's something going on around here, I know Dave Simpson of The Guardian quite well. Do you know Dave? He writes about pop music for The Guardian and lives around here. And you'll find him on Twitter and you'll find him on... It'd be worth making yourself known to him because he goes as far up to Glasgow to cover gigs. He does all that sort of indie music and stuff. And he'll go to Glasgow to watch Mumford & Sons or somebody. So there's bound to be gigs. That's actually not a bad area to start off as a freelance. As long as you don't need to earn £1,000 a week every week at this stage, because the thing about culture is, if it's just an idea, well, they can do that from London, but events that are going on here, and the West Yorkshire Playhouse, loads of stuff going on there, they may not have a chance to cover all of them. They're chief arts people, so that's not a bad area to be in, I don't think. Have a word with, what I would say is, get an example of have you written stuff already? Yeah. Lots of stuff, right. Pick your best bits. Find out who the arts editor of The Guardian is. I've no idea who it is these days. And The Telegraph and The Independent. Well, The Independent have got no money at all, so they are complete, they're a basket case. But certainly The Guardian, The Telegraph and The Times are worth getting in touch with. And like I say, there will be arts events, especially an interesting thing which you've found that they don't know about, and it's it might be something going on at the Crucible in Sheffield or whatever, and offer yourself really to do it, but give them examples of what you've done because they wouldn't send you to cover something if they weren't happy, So initially, I would say just sort of introduce yourself and say you've got your finger on the arts scene here, blah blah blah, and you've written what for college publications and things, or. Done a book? What was your book?
Called Keep All Cool. It's about music. Available on the Amazon Kindle.
Yeah. What's it called again?
Keep All Cool. It's about going through my music.
Keep it cool.
Keep All Cool.
Keep all cool.
Cool, like as in to destroy.
Coal.
Yeah, like a badger.
Right, like a badger coal. Keep all coal, and it's about your own record collection.
Yeah, it's about going through it and deciding what records to keep and that kind of sentiment.
That's a good idea.
So I did, that as a blog and then turned it into a book and then I'm going to be working with the Yorkshire Post and their arts desk and stuff.
Oh, right. Well, that's good. I mean, you're already halfway there, really, especially if you've done a book. Was it self-published or was it? Yeah, brilliant. Oh, that's excellent. Just send them extracts from your self-published book. Yeah, that's brilliant. Any more questions? Yeah.
What are your advice on writing blogs? Because we had Stuart Rosen in yesterday, and he said to me that don't write a blog until you become an accomplished journalist, like until you've got to the top. He says because otherwise, then you're not really entitled to write a blog. That's what he says.
Ooh, well, it depends what you're writing about. I think you're entitled to write a blog. You write a blog about being a student. I mean, if Charlie Brooker, coming back to him, but if he'd taken that advice, he would never have done his TV Go Home blog, which ended up as a column in the little A5 supplement, The Guardian, then ended up as a column in the paper and has now ended up as a TV show, a T-shirt, a takeaway Chinese meal. It's everything now. So so I would think that was. I don't like to contradict other speakers, but I think have something to say. Don't just write a blog. I would say don't write a football blog, for instance, unless you have something really, if you think you've got a really original point to make, because there's so many Arsenal blogs and Man United blogs, you just get lost. I can see where he's coming from. There's a danger you'll just get lost in all that. So I would say make sure you've got something to say, but you don't have to be a professional journalist to write a blog. Maybe run it past somebody here and say, would you be interested in reading this? And if they say no, then you publish. But, I would, as long as you've got something to say. Anybody else got any questions?
Is there a bit more money in magazines, do you think? Because we've had people from IPC here in the past, and they were saying, don't neglect that area.
No,
it's
don't.
more buoyant than newspapers.
Yes, I would say definitely, because a lot of they do pay. I don't know what they pay now, but when I was writing for GQ, they were paying. I think it was something like 30p a word. So if you did a 1,000-word piece, you would get, what would that be? 30p a word. Would that be £300? Would that be, or no? It must have been more than that. Then it must have been. Yeah, they would pay about £1,000 for a longish piece. What would 30p a word be? 1,000. Oh right, well it would be about 30p a word then, maybe. They're probably paying slightly less now, but Condé Nast is a hugely, that's GQ and Cosmopolitan, I think, and a couple of other, the travel magazine they do and all that. So yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree that magazines are more buoyant. But again, you need to know your market, read a few magazines, pick them up. And I presume most of them have got web versions. I don't know. See, the plan with a lot of publications is to be sort of on the net, because you've got to be on the net, but not fully on the net. So to get, premium content, you have to actually buy the magazine, which seems to me to make a bit more sense than what The Guardian do and just give everything away on the net.
That's the difference. They don't give it all away.
No.
And people always do have an interest in how, doing up their houses.
Yeah.
They've got niches. haven't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have any advice for someone who's looking to start writing a book?
Oh, God. So I'll plug well, the first book I wrote was my idea, and I came up with it. And you need to get an agent. You definitely need an agent if you want a published book. Unlike, obviously, the self-published book's slightly different, but if you want to get a publisher involved, and it's good to get a publisher involved because you get an advance, which gives you the money to go on and write the book, whatever it is. But my advice would be, you need a pitch. You need to write about 1,000-word synopsis, maybe slightly less, of what the book's all about. It needs a beginning, middle, and an end, obviously, and then you need to write a chapter. And that's the minimum, I think, that most publishers would want. Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling wrote the whole book, and it went around to loads of publishers. Don't write a whole book, I wouldn't say. I would say find agents, and there are a whole list of literary agents and things, and then write the synopsis for them and one chapter. And that would more or less, you could set it on that basis, rather than They won't buy just an idea. It could be the greatest idea in the world. They won't buy that. But they will buy it if you've got a synopsis and a chapter. Maybe they'll ask for 2 chapters. But that's how I flogged my first book. And the second book I was actually commissioned to write. So, yeah, on the basis of the first book, really. Yes? I don't know.
Interesting getting into local radio. How important do you think regional accent is to
I don't think accent makes a slight bit of difference, to be honest. But local radio is an interesting field. And I know lots of students from here go and do a bit in local radio. And again, the number of people I know who've gone into local radio work for nothing, you know, usually helping out a sports show because they need lots of pairs of hands to turn around, you know, reports and from various matches. But yeah, local radio is, I think, one of the fields that, you know, it wouldn't be implausible to get into. It'd be a lot easier. If I was doing work experience, I would certainly try and get onto one of the local radio stations, because you do get, the thing with local radio is they're trying to do the sort of, especially BBC local radio, because it's speech based, and they're trying to do a service rather like Radio 4, Radio 5 might do, with very few people. Therefore, when you're in there for work experience, you'll find yourself actually hands-on stuff. My daughter worked for a week at the Guardian, and 2 weeks at the Guardian and a week at the Independent, and barely did more than than make the coffee. Actually, she did a bit more at the Independent because they're a bit short of staff, but she did sort of little sidebars on sport things, you know. But local radio, you'll get real hands-on experience. So if you are interested in radio, I would say, and the BBC still have a commitment, you know, to train people and get them on air. And the good thing about the BBC is they've got, there's all these, I mean, there's a lot of bullshit at the BBC, but they do have these things like about trust and values, and it gives you an insight into the way the media works, I think. So, yeah, definitely. Local radio is good. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask if you have any tips for sort of writing a really good opinion piece without being too me, I.
An opinion piece without being me, I. I think if you're doing an opinion piece, that's what you are. I mean, if you look at the really good columnists writing opinion pieces, there'll be people like Alison Pearson and what she calls Suzanne Moore, Rod Liddell, all those people. That's what, because they annoy people. You know, they think, who the hell is this? You know, and that's what basically, to write a good opinion column, I think it needs to be a column that at least 50% of the people reading will see, where is she coming from, or whatever. You know, it's like Richard Littlejohn, who people hate. I think is a great columnist, Richard, because he's funny and he's very, very opinionated. I think it's a brilliant column. Rod Liddell, similarly in the Sunday Times, and Julie Burchill in her golden days, when she used to work for the Mail and for the Guardian, used to write some brilliant stuff. But it was I, me, very much so. You know, but I think if you don't want your I think if you're going to write opinion columns, you've got to be prepared to have your entire life scrutinised. You know, it's just these people like who write for the Mail. I've forgotten the name of that woman. She wrote a piece about she's really held back by the fact she's so attractive. I can't remember what her name was. Samantha Brick. That's right. But you know, if you're going to write a column like that, you've got to be prepared to take the brickbats, if you like. But yeah, that was. But no, you have to be opinionated to write. Bizarre thing is, many years ago, there's a mate of mine who went from the Independent to the Mail to do the op-ed pages. Now, the op-ed page is the column that goes opposite where the leader column is in the Daily Mail. Some people call it the YOY column. And it's always written by some sort of historian who's writing, why is the nation going to the dogs? Is it time to stop this feminist backlash? Isn't it time all the immigrants were thrown out of the country? And it was it's the angry column in the Daily Mail. And he was doing that page. And he said to me, I've got that bloody guy's name, Charlie Burgess, his name was. But anyway, he said to me, you know, you're always full of opinions. Why don't you write one of those and make it funny? Write an op-ed column for the Mail. And I thought, God, this is brilliant. I could be, you know, I thought this could be a new career for me. And I sat there for 2 days, but you've no idea how dispiriting it is. For 2 days I sat by the computer trying to work myself up into that Daily Mail froth of anger that could rather, and I couldn't do it. You know, I was saying to my kids, kick me, stab me, pour tea over me, make me angry. So it is, you know, you think you read Richard Littlejohn and those people, and you think, oh, I could do this. Very, very hard. I couldn't do it, but good luck to you if you manage to get that level of, or just personal, it doesn't even have to be anger. The Mail, it does, I suppose, but sort of personal animus, really, that Julie Burchill, Suzanne Moore, all those people have, you know. It's not easy.
I think about your fighting to it, should sport be entertainment? Has the entertainment angle of sport taken over from sport itself, do you think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, sport has to be entertainment. I mean, if you read, the Americans are heavily into statistics, and if you know, who cares really how much, you know, it's mildly interesting, you know, from one point of view to know that somebody made so many yards in a match, and obviously American football's more about, you know, about making yardage. But no, I think it's a marvellous development that football's, and I'm taking a slight bit of credit for having done that Guardian column for 16 years, for looking at, you know, haircuts, and that's the interesting thing about football, the daft haircuts and the bad behaviour and all the other stuff, I think, and the commentators. So yeah, I don't know. I think the balance is not quite enough on the entertainment side. There should be more. I think, you know, these people are paid $100,000 a week. They should be held up to ridicule on a regular basis. Far too, you know, rather than. I mean, I make an exception for some players, but mostly they should be held up to ridicule, I think.
What advice would you give somebody that's currently working in community radio that wants to break into either BBC local radio or commercial radio?
Well, community radio, I think, is highly underrated as a means of getting into radio. And there are. So, are you working in community radio? So, which one?
Drystone Radio.
Drystone Radio.
Oh,
right.
12 hours a week of live broadcasting, and then I'm also a co-commentator for BCB.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I mean, to me, that is a brilliant grounding. I did an interview last week on a radio station called JCOM, which is Jewish radio for North Leeds. And they have a very interesting, they have a Desert Island Discs show where they get some personality, Jewish personality in to talk, and they call it the Negev Desert Discs, which I thought was rather good. Although they got annoyed with me because they asked me to do a name check, and they're on medium wave. They're on medium wave and on the net. Is that what yours is on? Is that?
FM.
Oh, you've got an FM. Yeah. Well, they were moaning they didn't have an FM, and they were moaning even more. And I said, "This is Jewish radio." And they don't even call themselves Jewish radio; it's JCOM. But I said, "This is Jewish radio on 1365 meters." But to you, 1345. It was slightly over the pale. I had to do that again. But no, I was, despite the fact that the equipment there was primitive, as I suspect yours is, I was impressed with the enthusiasm and actually the quality of it, because I listened to a little bit on, you know, somebody else doing it on the way home, and it was quite good. So I would say, if you're already doing that, get a demo tape together, not a long one, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. And just send it to Rosina Breen at Radio Leeds, or, you know, because she's in charge there, or whoever's in charge at Radio York and Radio Lancashire, you know, stations around the area. And if that doesn't work, send it to other stations. But again, like most things these days, it's squeezed, it's difficult, but don't be discouraged, I would say, because it's possible that you may be rejected just on the grounds that there's no vacancy for anyone. You may be invited in to do a bit of work on the sports show or something like that, or you may be rejected out of hand. But it won't be. I mean, when I first applied to do journalism back in the dark ages, I was rejected first of all, but then somebody left because he'd thrown a typewriter at them, and there was a job opened up completely by chance. My letter happened to be the first one on the pile. It's as simple as that. So, you know, don't be discouraged. I would say write lots of letters, send lots of emails, generally. Probably.
Just that, Rosina Breen was a lecturer here till quite recently, so she knows Trinity.
Yeah, so she'll be in sympathy. I think Radio Leeds generally is in sympathy with students from here, because we've had a lot, and you know, a lot of them have gone on to do reasonably well, I think. So, yes, I'd go for it. Is that me finished?
Well,
brilliant.
yeah, thank you. Only because people have got to move elsewhere for the next.
Right, no problem.
But can I just thank you so much for your energy?
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. So,